United States support in terms of new budget that will be adopted very soon. What kind of a support Ukraine can expect, do you think?
So the U.S. is continuing right now to go through the negotiation process about a national budget that will fund the government for the next fiscal year, which actually started in October.
Right.
So what we're going to be expecting now is whether or not Ukraine will have a supplemental payment, because it's already been decided that Ukraine will not be part of the full budget. It'll be a separate part of that.
Okay.
And so right now it's a question as to whether or not that will be sent to the Congress, whether or not there'll be a vote on that. And if there is, what that's going to look like. I mean, how much money are we talking about to do what? And that's still not known.
Let's speculate.
Sure. I mean, I think that it's more probable that the U.S. would sponsor something like weaponry for Ukraine, because it's easier to justify. It's produced in the United States, so the money stays in the U.S. It creates jobs. It's a net positive for the U.S. economy. Whereas we're talking about financial support for Ukraine, which the U.S., 5% of the support or so that the United States is giving to Ukraine is financial. That is specifically paying for the government salaries in Ukraine and other things due to the huge deficits the government currently is suffering. So firefighters and things like that are de facto being paid by the United States. And so that is something that there's a lot more resistance to, because it's something that's less tangible. It's money that leaves the country. There's no guarantee that it'll ever come back. And so it is a big question as to whether or not there'll still be support for that.
Okay, but what are the main challenges? What are the obstacles in providing support to Ukraine? What do you think? These are only that, maybe more, maybe something that we don't know, don't see? Maybe you see that from United States.
I think that the opposition in the United States is diverse as to why there's people opposed to it or where there might be obstacles. And the largest, frankly, is simply that the American public as a whole supports Ukraine far less now than they did before. Both in the Republican and Democratic Party, obviously much stronger in the Republican Party. But polling numbers indicate there's a reason for that. And the reason is lack of information. A great deal of Americans simply do not know what is occurring in Ukraine. They're not up to date on the war. And they don't realize that this is a fight that can be won. Undoubtedly, it can be won. It just needs more assistance, and that this is strategically in the U.S.'s long-term interest. So once Americans know that, once they understand how much money we're talking about, 3.5% of the U.S. defense budget, or 3/10 of 1% of the U.S. budget, they support Ukraine much stronger.
Exactly, and a big thank you effort, as my friend likes to say, Stephen Moore. But let me ask you, Mike Johnson, United States Senate Speaker. Well, the Ukrainian media are too fast and maybe too risky to call someone anti-Ukrainian. I think it is stupid, because that actually turns things and people against Ukraine in the end. What would be the wise way to turn Mr. Johnson, if not into pro-Ukrainian faith, then at least to put him in a position when it is favorable for him to become more pro-Ukrainian? As a political scientist and technologist, can you please educate Ukrainian media how to do that?
I totally agree with you. I think it's incredibly unwise to refer to people who don't support aid at this point as being anti-Ukraine. I mean, at that point, why would they want to help Ukraine? Because you've already labeled them as being an enemy. It serves no purpose whatsoever, and it's cheap populism that ultimately hurts the country. It'd be far wiser to refer to it as people who, simply don't know yet and need to have it explained to them, people that are skeptical. You can be skeptical about something and be convinced to the contrary. Exactly. So right now he is skeptical about the assistance, but that doesn't mean he's against. It means he doesn't really fully understand the logic of it. And we got to help him to understand that.
Yeah, well, that's how you make good friends afterwards. If you educate someone, if you will be able to turn your possible enemy, not your enemy, into your friend, that is the wise decision. That's what diplomacy is for, I believe so. And media should help. Well, yeah. We have what we have at the moment. But would it be wise to use the narrative like, I don't know, close the sky, people die, and something of a sort, to make American parliamentarians understand that every day Ukrainian people die because of the hesitation? Is that the way? Do you think this is wise?
The thing is that at this point, I don't think that's probably the talking points you need. And the reason is simple, is that Americans are already familiar with the situation in Ukraine. It's been over a year and 6 months. At this point, that's something that they're already fully indoctrinated to. And so the reality is when you're trying to persuade somebody, there's a concept called baking in. It's something that's already inside their minds. They've already understood that, and they understand that. And it's not going to convince them any further, just repeating it. What you need is to present them with new information, different information. So if they understand that there's a link between what is happening in Ukraine and Russia's relationship with Iran, which is also helping to attack Ukraine. But Iran's also helping to attack Israel. If they understand there's a relationship between those things, it's a positive. If they understand that this is something that is strategically wise and in the interest of Taiwan,
Right.
as well as of the NATO countries, then they understand this in a new way than they currently understand it. Currently, they understand it as an isolated country doing its isolated war. No, this is not isolated. It's part of a global structure of what is occurring, and it's definitely in the U.S.'s strategic interest to help Ukraine.
Absolutely. I wonder if Mr. Jason Smart in America right now personally heard anything about like Ukrainian investments in their own air defense. Have you heard anything about that? Like Ukrainians are ready and investing in their own military infrastructure.
Yes, Ukraine is. And the fact is that the air defense continues to be a very important issue. And let's be fair, at this point, I think it's actually more important than even it was a year ago. And the reason is simple. A year ago, if we look at the energy sector in Ukraine, there was replacement parts for a lot of different things that Russia was able to destroy in the energy sector. At this point, obviously, there's just simply less parts than there was before. Why? Where are these parts produced? Well, they're produced in the Soviet Union, which no longer exists, or in Russia, a lot of them, which is not a country that's going to be selling to Ukraine anytime soon. So if there are more attacks, it's actually more dangerous for Ukraine than before. So if the West wants Ukraine to win, a country without energy is going to be impossible. But Ukraine's making the right investment, trying to buy this. But the West has to support Ukraine and buying more air defense and sending more air defense now, because this is going to be much more challenging now than it was before to protect Ukraine from Russia's aerial bombardments.